Good evening and welcome to This Week in Turkey. Top officials of Turkey have reacted to the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. The statements urge both Iran and the US to act with restraint and common sense.
President Recep Tayyip Erdogan had said that the news of General Qasem Soleimani's death shocked Turkish officials. In an interview on January 5, Erdogan said that he talked to US President Donald Trump over the phone just hours before Soleimani was killed. What's interesting is that I talked to Trump that night, and this happened 4 or 5 hours later. It means that this was planned. We were shocked to hear the news, Erdogan said. I told Trump that tensions with Iran shouldn't be increased, he added. Soleimani was the Major General of the Revolutionary Guards Quds Force, which is in charge of Tehran's overseas clandestine and military operations. He was killed on January 3 in a US airstrike on his convoy at Baghdad airport. Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, who bestowed the country's highest honor on Soleimani last year, vowed severe retaliation in response to his killing. Early on January 8, Iran launched more than a dozen ballistic missiles against US military and coalition forces in Iraq. Minister of Foreign Affairs Mevlut Çavuşoğlu organized an evaluation meeting on the foreign policy of Turkey in 2019 on January 6, where he also addressed the killing of Soleimani. The killing of Soleimani in Iraq has posed a serious risk and threat to the peace and stability of our region. We are making efforts to reduce the tensions between the US and Iran through diplomacy, he said. Furthermore, presidential spokesperson Ibrahim Kalın said at a press conference on January 7 that at this point, we do not have any expectations, demand, or claim to be a mediator. Turkey is among a couple of countries that can talk to both the US and Iran, maybe the most important one. In a joint statement released by President Erdogan and President Putin on January 8 after the meeting in Istanbul, both presidents said they were deeply concerned about the escalation of tension between the US and Iran. We evaluate the US air operation targeting the commander of the Quds Force of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, Qasem Soleimani, and his entourage in Baghdad on January 3, 2020, as an act undermining security and stability in the region, read the statement. The statements also urged both Iran and the US to act with restraint and common sense, saying they should prioritize diplomacy.
This evening we have Galip Dalay on our Skype line. Mr. Dalay is a guest lecturer at Oxford University, and this evening we will be talking about two different issues with them. Firstly, we will begin with Soleimani's assassination and its repercussions in Turkey. And secondly, we will also be talking about the call for a ceasefire by Putin and Erdogan in Libya. Good evening, Mr. Dalay. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me.
So, Mr. Dalay, I would firstly like to talk about Turkey's reaction to the assassination. It seems that Erdogan is treading carefully on the news. What do you think he has in mind, and how do you evaluate his reaction and Turkey's reaction at large?
Well, Turkey has been careful in its reaction, as you put it. It tried not to take a side, rather than focusing the repercussion of this assassination on the region, on Turkey's immediate neighborhood. So therefore, Turkey's response has more focus on the repercussion of this killing rather than whether this killing was, negative or positive from a larger perspective. And you see also the tone of disappointment in the statement of Erdogan. He says that he spoke to Trump only a few hours before this killing, and he was not informed about it. So that very much reflects some form of disappointment in this process as well too. But nevertheless, when you look at the statement of the Turkish Foreign Ministry, but also the statement of Erdogan, even though the statement of Erdogan was more critical of this killing, much more critical of this killing than that of the Prime Ministry, but nevertheless, both of them tried to kind of play the role of a neutral third partner rather than taking anyone's side at this stage. So it has been carefully crafted and not really ordered in this part.
Well, you mentioned Erdogan's disappointment when Trump did not inform him about the news, but Trump and Erdogan do have a close relationship. Do you think at this point President Trump will have any specific requests from Turkey in the upcoming weeks, depending on developments?
Well, depending on how the developments will evolve from now on, but also depending on what the U.S. wants vis-a-vis the Iran. Does U.S. want really de-escalation, as has been stated by the Trump, or does U.S. want to actually push Iran further back? So depending on the goal of this killing and then the process that will follow afterward, I think there will be more and more engagement between Turkey and the U.S. down the road as well too. In this regard, I think the U.S. need for Turkey has increased a bit more after this killing. So therefore, the Turkey sends vis-a-vis U.S. has gotten one more item on its hand. But at this stage, I don't expect like any major role for Turkey to play. But nevertheless, given the fact that Turkey has a very good relation with Iran, and but also like particularly,
I think we have a.
Turkey is positioned to play a role.
And what do you think? How will the relations of Turkey evolve with the Arab nations, depending on the position it takes in the upcoming days?
Well, it seems that the Arab nations are quite careful as well too. I mean, one nation after another nation came forward saying that they were not informed about this attack, and they were concerned about the repercussion of this attack. So in this regard, it seems that most of the Arab states are not very excited or are not very happy about this killing itself, even though they dislike Qasem Soleimani very much, most of the Arab states, even though the Saudi Arabia or the UAE highly likely will be quite happy if the Iranian has been poked in the eyes. But nevertheless, given the reach and then the depth of a possible Iranian response that can easily cover the Gulf, that can easily cover Saudi Arabia and UAE, I think they are very much concerned. And given the fact that we don't know whether they will enjoy a U.S. protection in the event of a Iranian retaliation that will aim at the Gulf particularly. I mean, we saw last year in the case of the Aramco attack in Saudi Arabia, we saw like the Iran playing quite a destabilizing role for the passage of the energy routes. So Iran can easily and possibly play such a role again. And in this regard, given the vulnerability of most of the Gulf states, I think they will be quite careful on what they say publicly, and that's why that is how they have behaved on this matter.
Mr. Dalay, you mentioned that Turkey at this point is rather reacting as a neutral third party. Do you think this is an opportunity for Turkey to become a regional peacemaker and change its image from being a regional bully?
Well, I mean, regional peacemaker would be seen as quite an ambitious term, because in the end, the Turkey and Iran did have a rather relatively, at least a manageable relations. But the Turkish problem in this regard lies with other regional countries, be it Egypt, be it Saudi Arabia, UAE, Israel, Bahrain, etc. So in this regard, I don't think that there will be any major change on this file. But nevertheless, this is an opportunity if Turkey does play it well and does play it carefully. So given the fact that it has good relation with Iran, it has like a good relation with the Trump personally, but also very good relation. I mean, at least an improving relation with the Iraqi government. I think that presents Turkey with an opportunity. But whether Turkey will be able to play it or not, it will depend whether the actors, be it Iran or US, would like Turkey to play such a role. But B, whether the Turkey will play its card carefully. But nevertheless, yes, there is a window of opportunity, provided that the US or the Iranian down the road will be interested in this escalation, will be interested in some form of mediation for the reduction of tension. Yes, the Turkey can play a role, but at this stage, I think this window is quite limited.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dalay. We'll be right back with you after our next news package. Russian President and Turkish President Erdogan have called for a ceasefire in Libya and urged all parties in the war-torn country to come together around a negotiating table for peace.
The call was made during talks between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Istanbul on January 8. In a joint statement, Turkey and Russia called on parties in Libya to declare a sustainable ceasefire supported by the necessary measures to be taken for stabilizing the situation on the ground and normalizing daily life in Tripoli and other cities. Turkey's parliament last week approved a motion on deploying troops to Libya upon a request from the country's internationally recognized Government of National Accord. Erdogan revealed in an interview with CNN Turk on January 5 that Turkish forces have begun deploying in Libya. On January 8, it was revealed that 35 soldiers had been sent to Libya, but they will not partake in any combat. The 35 military personnel are only tasked with providing coordination, Erdogan said, adding, the soldiers will not fight. Other soldiers, who will go there later, will also not enter any combat. Moscow and Ankara support opposing sides in the Libyan conflict, with the former backing the Libyan National Army, led by Khalifa Haftar, and the latter supporting the GNA, led by Fayez al-Sarraj.
We are back with Galip Dalay. Mr. Dalay, so as it was mentioned in our news package, Turkey and Russia have called for a ceasefire in Libya, and they name themselves as mediators in this situation. Were you surprised to hear this statement, given that just a week earlier, Turkish parliament had passed a motion to deploy troops to Libya? How do you explain this shift in strategy?
No, I was not surprised, and actually, I think like it was quite logical what has followed up, and what we are saying in a sense like replication of the Syria in a limited manner in a different crisis context. I think the Turkey-Russian engagement on Libya will not be able to like deliver on a Libya-wide scale, but it can be quite more focused on the Tripoli and its immediate surrounding. So in this regard, what has happened during the travel, during the visit of Putin was actually to some extent for analysts was expected that there will be what I call a limited Astana focus on Tripoli and its surrounding. And in this regard, both sides, before going to the table, they did in a sense scale up on the ground. Both sides strengthen their positions so to make sure that they are not losing ground while engaging in the talks. So in this regard, this is like the dynamic that we see between on the ground developments and around the table developments, and both processes are contributing into each other, and both processes you cannot decouple from each other. We should also keep in mind that the Russian mercenaries are on the ground, very much fighting on behalf of Haftar as well too. So in this regard, when you look at the picture, actually that perfectly makes sense. What is developing, what is following from on the ground developments to the around the table developments.
Before coming to Turkey, President Putin actually was in Syria and he visited his ally Bashar al-Assad, and they went to a mosque together, etc. Do you think this has any symbolic meaning, or is there a message that he wanted to give prior to President Erdogan prior to his visit?
I think not only President Erdogan, but he wants to give a message to the outside of the world, which is effectively the armed phase of the Syrian crisis is over. Now we are at the political process, and now it's a time that Putin is arguing. Now it's a time that to normalize the Assad regime regionally and internationally. To that extent, he actually particularly wants to normalize the Assad regime through the Arab League, if possible. But Putin makes no secret of its intention down the road to build a relation between Turkey and the Assad regime as well too. So this is perfectly part of the strategy of the Russia that at this stage try to normalize the Assad regime both bilaterally with Turkey, regionally through the Arab Spring and other regional bodies, but also internationally if it's possible. So in this regard, this is like one more declaration from the Russian side that now is the time for the political process, as Russia thinks that the military aspect of the crisis very much is over now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dalay, for your evaluations both on the assassination of Soleimani and the call for ceasefire in Libya.
Thank you very much.
The Turk Stream natural gas pipeline has been launched with a ceremony in Istanbul. Presidents of Turkey, Russia, and Serbia, as well as the Prime Minister of Bulgaria and the energy ministers from the countries, attended the ceremony.
Stretching 930 kilometers across the Black Sea, the Turk Stream is an undersea pipeline, the construction of which started in 2017, that will carry natural gas from Western Siberian fields to Turkey and on to Europe. Speaking at the ceremony held at Istanbul's Haliç Congress Center, Putin began his words saying that despite efforts at obstruction, Russian-Turkish cooperation is developing in all fields. Russia and Turkey together can solve some of the world's most complex, ambitious tasks for the common good, he asserted, adding that the two countries will implement many more mutually beneficial projects in energy and other areas in the future. I am sure that in the future, Russia and Turkey will implement many more mutually beneficial projects, both in energy and other areas, he said. Erdogan termed the Turk Stream project historic in terms of bilateral ties and cooperation in the energy field. During his speech, Erdogan also ruled out any project in the Eastern Mediterranean excluding Turkey. There is no chance of realizing any project in the Eastern Mediterranean that excludes our country, he said. The Turk Stream natural gas pipeline has a total capacity of 31.5 billion cubic meters, out of which the first line will carry 15.75 billion cubic meters of Russian gas to Turkish consumers. The second line will extend from Bulgaria to Serbia and Hungary. Bulgaria hopes to be able to make shipments to Serbia by May and build the whole section by year-end.
Journalist for the secular nationalist daily Sözcü Çiğdem Toker has reached the property deeds of the largest terrain purchases on the Kanal Istanbul route. These terrains are owned by 3 Arab companies.
According to Toker, the 3 companies are owned by Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, respectively. They have purchased the biggest terrains in Arnavutköy, on the route of Kanal Istanbul. This fact fortifies the notion that the project is indeed a big real estate project, she stated. Istanbul Metropolitan Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu has previously stated that since 2011, 30 million squares worth of terrain had been sold. What is the interest towards this agricultural land? The biggest terrains are owned by 3 Arab companies. 30 million meter squares mean the total of the districts of Beyoğlu, Bayrampaşa, and Gazi Osman Pasha, he added. It has been some time now that a bloc has been created against Qatar in the Gulf. This bloc is led by Saudi Arabia and includes the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait. Further, the bloc is disturbed by Turkey's developments of relations with Qatar being carried to strategic levels. It had previously been discovered that the mother of the Emir of Qatar had bought 44 acres of land from the site of the Kanal Istanbul project. After the news, the Ministry of Environment and Urbanization had tried to prevent queries on property deeds by issuing a circular. In her article, Çiğdem Toker states that countries against Qatar in the Gulf are investing on the route of Kanal Istanbul. Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality spokesperson Murat Ongun had tweeted in Arabic that Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality had withdrawn from the Kanal Istanbul Cooperation Protocol. Qatari media mogul Abdullah bin Ahmed al-Hashimi responded to the tweet in Turkish, stating, "We will continue to purchase terrains around the canal. We will continue to support Turkish economy." Meanwhile, the workshop organized by the Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality on various aspects of the Kanal Istanbul project took place today in Istanbul. Many experts and academics discussed the project under titles such as the political economy of Kanal Istanbul, city planning, urbanism and transportation, ecological aspect, water and ecology, social aspects and participation, legal framework and safety, disaster risks and earthquakes, cultural heritage, and climate and ecology.
The administration of Istanbul University has pulled back on the decision to increase cafeteria prices after students of the university protested the decision.
Students at Istanbul University's main campus in Beyazıt, a historical part of Istanbul, had launched a petition in protest against a rise in meal prices in the cafeteria. The students were previously able to eat 3 times a day for 3.5 liras per meal in the cafeteria. The administration's new policy cancelled breakfasts and limited the number of meals that can be eaten for 3.5 liras. Students who wanted to eat a second meal on the same day are forced to pay 18.5 liras, which amounts to some 450 liras a month. Following the administration's decision that was announced on December 31st, students carried out a protest in front of the university, carrying banners that read, "We are students, not customers. Budget cuts can't be reflected on students," and "Universities are not commercial organizations." The students on January 2nd wanted to submit their petitions to Rector Mahmut Ak for the reversal of the decision, but were met with police brutality that was widely condemned on social media. On January 6th, The rectorate of Istanbul University announced that they had pulled back from the decision to increase prices in the cafeteria. In a statement, the rectorate indicated that the cafeteria will continue services as is, and that they would look into other areas and make arrangements in the budget.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. See you next Friday at 9 p.m. Good night.